Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop, and today we're talking about hide glue, because it's around here somewhere. Hide glue is a really interesting substance. For most of human history, hide glue has been a byproduct of cooking. On Thanksgiving, when you render down the turkey, and in the bottom of the pot, after you pull the meat and bones out, there's this glop down at the bottom. That's basically hide glue. If you've ever had Jell-O, most of the time, you've eaten hide glue. Hide glue is just the rendered down protein from animal substance, and you can make it out of just about any body part. There's hide glue, brain glue, fish glue, horn glue, hoof glue. There's different types of glues from just about any type of animal that's ever been cooked. And each one of them has slightly different characteristics for different applications. If you ever talk to a luthier, they'll tell you about several of them that they use on every instrument. The cool thing is it's actually really easy to make. I actually have an old video taking rawhide dog chew toys and turning them into actually this bag. And for thousands and thousands of years, hide glue was the glue. There really weren't that many other options. There were some other options with pitch and some other plant options, but for 99% of everything you did, you used hide glue. And still to this day, it is the go-to glue for a lot of woodworkers. And if you talk to luthiers and people in very specific circumstances, they'll say that it is the only glue to use. And even for me, one of the weird techie, I like new tools kind of guy, I actually still use hide glue quite a bit. There are a lot of things that it does really well that the modern glues just don't do well. Let's take a closer look at exactly what it is. If you buy it raw, it's usually going to come in these pellets and grains that have been ground up. The cool thing about this is all you have to do is add some water to it and you'll turn this basically into Jell-O. You can actually use cooking gelatin, those packets. It does the exact same thing. It's just refined a little bit more than what you're going to get from your normal hide glue. And these pellets just need two things to be functional. Number one, they need moisture. And how much moisture you put in it depends upon your own characteristic and what you're looking for in the different applications. But number two, they also need heat. And once you add the heat, you can take that gelatin and it becomes runny. And that runny gelatin you can put wherever you want. And once it cools down, then it becomes kind of tacky and hard. And then later, once it has fully dried, it's done. That's all there is to it. But the cool thing about it is that makes it reversible because all that's inside is this same powder we had from before. If you can inject moisture back into the joint and heat it up a little bit, it will become gelatin again and you can take it apart. It is a reversible glue that you can add to it as many times as you want. That's one of the things that makes it amazing for instruments because instruments need to be taken apart. You need to regularly take pieces off and put them back on. And if you do that with regular PVAs and epoxies, they don't bond to themselves as well. Not to mention they're very, very hard to reverse. Now, it's not saying you can't reverse a PVA. It's possible, but it takes a lot more work. And once it's done, you have to get rid of the PVA out of the joint before you can redo it. With hide glue, it's relatively easy to reverse in comparison. And once it's done, you just add a little bit more moisture to it and glue it back again, and it's done. In its dry form, it doesn't have a shelf life. This will last for just about ever. We've found this in the pyramids, and it still works. It's still fully functional hide glue. Add some water, a little bit of heat, and you can use it again, as long as you want. It's caveat time. Now, don't get me wrong, I use hide glue quite a bit, and I really enjoy it, and I use it for a lot of different things. But I also use PVA, and I also use epoxy, and I also use super glues. They all have different characteristics and different things that they do really well. But if you ever want to get into fine furniture, you really need to learn about hide glue. Not to mention, if you ever want to get into furniture restoration, you've got to get to know hide glue because you're going to be taking it out of the joints and putting it back in. So let's talk about historically how hide glue is used. Usually the day before, you would take your flakes or your powdered glue and you would add a little bit of water. Usually somewhere around 50-50 by volume, but yeah, give or take something around there. Really not an accurate science. Then you put that glue pot into your double boiler and you put that double boiler on the fire. You use a double boiler because you don't want it to get too hot. And if you put it on the fire directly, you'll actually get to the point where the water boils out of it and the glue, well, it dries again. A double boiler will make sure that it stays below boiling. And that's really all you need it to be. Somewhere between 120 and 200 degrees Fahrenheit and you're good to go. Or like 50 to 95 in Celsius. The hotter you make the glue, the more runny it will be. The more water you put into it, the more runny it will be. The colder you have it, the thicker it'll be. So it depends on your application. Do you want it to be something that's runny that works down into the glue a little deeper? Or do you want it to be something that's a little thicker that might have a better gap filling capability? Also, by adjusting the temperature and the amount of water, you can actually change its working time. So if you need a project that's kind of fiddly and you gotta work at it for a while, you increase the heat a little bit. And then at the end of the day, when you're done, you take your glue pot off of the heat and you just let it cool, and it turns into this gelatinous mess at the bottom of the pot. The next day when you come in, you just take that pot and you put it right back onto the heat, you get it up to temperature again, and it's ready to go. If you need a little bit more, you add some more in there, add a little more water, constitute it, and bring it back to what you want. This would be a great thing for the apprentice to have an eye on and just watch the pot throughout the day, sticking the brush in and seeing how runny it is. But then the cool thing you could do is if you wanted it to have a little bit more working time, you could actually, pee in it. Yeah, kind of gross, but the urea in there will actually cause it to have a longer working time. And honestly, that's basically what liquid hide glue is now. It stays close to liquid at room temperature. It's not quite that hard gelatinous mess. But even this, you probably still want to warm it up a little bit before you use it. And that's why I've had my old brown glue sitting here in my SV Suker mug. I just fill this up with pure hot water out of the tap, put that in there about 10 minutes before I want to use it, and it's ready to go. Old Brown is just a liquid hide glue, and so it's actually liquid at room temperature, but you heat it up a little bit more, and you'll get a really nice runny consistency that is exactly what you want. You can use this bottle to put it straight onto your work, and it's great stuff. When I reach for hide glue, I generally don't go to this because this takes a little bit more work. The liquid hide glue is great. And you can even go to Titebond. They make liquid hide glue. It's basically the exact same thing, except Old Brown is kind of the organic version. Titebond, you don't quite know what's in it. It is exactly the same thing, basically, except for tracing down where the hide comes from is a little harder. Whereas Old Brown is a very simple glue made by a guy out in California. He makes large batches of it and sells it. You can actually get it at oldbrown.com. So when exactly do I use hide glue over some of the other options? I generally use hide glue for things where either I have a historical value in it, or it's probably going to need to be repaired. If I'm making Windsor chairs or other delicate things, particularly chairs, they're going to break over time, and you want to have something you can repair them with. If I'm making massive structural things with huge joints, and hide glue isn't something I'm going to lean towards. But anything I really want to think about its repairability, hide glue is the first place I go to. The other place where hide glue shines is on instruments. Because you can get different gram strengths, you're actually going to be able to change its capability. A lower number on the grain strength is actually something that's going to be a little bit more flexible. So if you have a cross-grain connection, you might want a lower grain strength because it might be more flexible. If you're going to work with something where you need that resonant tone, you're probably going to want a higher grain strength. It's something that's a little bit more brittle but gives you that tone resonance you're looking for. For general woodworking, I'm usually shooting for something around the 250 range. I like that for a lot of the cabinetry and joinery, but for things like veneering and marquetry, I'm usually going to go for something around the 192 or lower. That's actually what Old Brown is, it's 192. Be careful, that gram number there is not the strength of the glue. It's not how hard does it hold. It has to do with its viscosity and its flexibility. All hide glues are roughly around the same strength. Yeah, there's going to be some differences from batch to batch and different things, but the hide glue strength and its actual capability of bonding things together is about the same across the board. The other place where hide glue really shines is it doesn't need clamping force. Now, theoretically, PVA doesn't need clamping force. It still holds without it, but without the clamping force, it won't reach its maximum capacity. If you want to reach the full strength of a PVA, you've got to clamp the snot out of it, and you've got to put a lot of pressure on it. You don't need that with hide glue. Now, you don't need that with epoxy and super glue as well, but that brings us to the marquetry and veneering I was talking about earlier. With hide glue, you can actually hammer glue it, which is basically just squeegeeing the bubble out from underneath the veneer, and then the hide glue sticks. You don't need anything special. If you're ever trying to veneer with a PVA, you've got to use pressure. You basically have to make a plywood clamp that applies a large pressure over a wide area. And that can be a pain. Whereas with hide glue, you don't need to do that. You can basically use a squeegee to run it down and work the bubbles out, and it's stuck. That means you can also do a rub joint with hide glue. You put glue on both sides and you rub them back and forth until the bubble is out of there, and then you set it aside, and it's glued. You don't need any clamps to do it. Now, you can do a rub joint with PVA, but again, you're not going to reach its full strength without the clamping. It will work to rub the bubbles out of there and set it aside, but you're only going to be somewhere around half the strength as if you actually put the full clamping pressure on there. With hide glue, you don't have to worry about that. You can rub joint and get just as strong as if you put the clamps on there and squeeze the snot out of it. Hide glue is an incredibly valuable glue, and there's a reason it's been used for thousands of years and probably will be in use for thousands of years more. Not to mention, out of all the glues, if you're ever worried about toxicity, this is basically Jell-O. You can eat it if you want. I know there's a few kids in kindergarten who have eaten the PVA, but you're not going to want to do that, and especially not epoxy and super glue. There's a lot of chemicals over there, whereas with hide glue, it's just animal protein. It's one of those things that, is it the best glue in all situations? No, there are definitely situations where I use the others, but there are a lot of times where hide glue is just the one I reach for. It's simple, it's fun, and if I'm ever feeling artsy-fartsy, it's most definitely the one I get. There's something about making your own hide glue and then building a joint with it, especially in the hand tool world where you're putting all of your own physical power into it. Why then go and put in all those chemicals when you can do something you actually made from your own dog toy? Hide glue, it's fun stuff. So I hope you like this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, snide remarks, or things that I should have mentioned, there are a lot more things about hide glue, and I would love to talk about it for hours because it is rather fascinating. But this is YouTube and they don't like those long videos. So I hope you like this. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, throw those down below, and thank you, that does help us out. Anytime you even throw some snide remark that hurts my feelings, it helps us out, and really it means a lot to me. So thank you for that. Or you could just put CBD or CBD or CDB down below, thank you. But if you really want to be amazing, wonderful, benevolent, and gorgeous, think about joining those people over there. Those are some of the patrons on Patreon. And without patrons, we wouldn't be here. We are sponsored by you guys. And I get to say what I want to say about the topics I want to say rather than what Type Bond or some other company wants me to say. I get to talk about old brown glue or the hide glue that I made myself. So if you like that, then think about becoming a patron. Links down below. I think that'll do it for now. And until next time, have a wonderful day. The one thing I didn't mention about PVA, epoxy, and super glue is that you can always find them. They're not a hidden glue. Yeah, you knew that joke was coming. It's just one of those things that I just have to get out. It's kind of a sticky situation for me.